standard. The fact is, living at home is not the outlier anymore. Technically, it was always the norm. If you're a single guy in your late 20s still living at home, like me, the truth is, people already have a story written about you, and it usually isn't a flattering one. They will see you as lazy, they will see you as not a real man. But the reality is, it's just the way it has to be for a lot of Gen Z. Unless you're willing to do living with roommates and such. And me personally, I made the choice that if I'm going to be in a if I'm not going to be able to buy a house and have it all to myself, I would rather live with people that I know are going to treat me with a level of respect, that being my parents, instead of finding either random roommates or discovering a new type of annoyance with a friend. I think I mentioned in a previous video that some of my friends actually moved in together in a place that they're renting, which I can respect, you know? If that's what works for them, if they're willing to put in the money that it takes for that, by all means, that is their choice, or they're doing what they have to do if they were kicked out by their parents. And I respect their decision, even if it's not the one I would personally make. Or if I ended up having to do that, I'd probably barricade myself in whatever room I have to myself and live off of whatever it is I'd have to eat that would lead to me not having to share other spaces more than I have to. But before I get into more about that, don't forget to give this video a like, comment if you've been perceived as such as a man living at home in his late 20s, or if you're a stay-at-home daughter, let me know in the comments down below so that I know that it's Gen Z and not just Gen Z men. Subscribe for cultural commentary and rants from a man caught between generations. In my case, I am a zillennial. And be sure to join me at the Zillennial Nexus Point Discord. Link will be in the description below. But yeah, getting back to the main point. Society slaps labels on you when it comes to this. They think that you're lazy, you're unambitious, you have a failure to launch. And I'm just gonna say this. Women don't endure this same level of scrutiny, though. Them moving out and being independent is glorified a lot more often in media than it is for men to be able to do that. Name one time you've heard the phrase stay at home daughter that wasn't from me, or if you haven't heard it in the mainstream. Go on, I'll wait. In the meantime, yeah, the fact is, not everyone, not every late 20s man living at home, stay at home sons are going to fit that archetype or stereotype. But the label does shape how others interact with you before they even know you. You could be saving up money for a down payment on a house so that you're not pissing away money on rent that you're never going to see again. You could be working on an ambitious project and you're actually more ambitious than people who moved out and are footing the bill for not living at home in the form of rent or a mortgage, more likely rent. But you are actually doing something more interesting than whatever job they're doing. But yeah, even if you're doing that, living at home can still dent your perceived manhood by in other people's eyes. They don't see you as independent, they don't see you as a provider or a real adult. Basically, you are not economically or romantically viable in their eyes. Yeah, men are economically objectified the way that women are sexually objectified. They're expected to move out, stand on their own, and provide, even in a brutal economy and even in a world where technically men don't really need to be providers like they used to be. Like I talked about in my what video was it again? God, I do so many. I need to refresh myself on which one that was. Oh yeah, how dating and jobs are the same thing. Yeah, men are economically objectified, and women generally still prefer to date a man who makes more than them, even if it's technically not something they really need. I remember David from How to Beast's now wife said something about how women still want a man who can provide in the event that, I don't know, they like to have the option. I mean, I'm all about having options, but come on. You've seen what the economy is like. You've seen what the real world is like. Most couples can not afford to have to be on a single income. That's just the facts. But yeah, culturally, independence is still strongly associated with masculinity, or at least the boomer definition of independence of moving out at 18 in what was ultimately, by the looks of it, an anomaly of an economy where everything was great. If America is to be considered an empire, and there's the whole 250-year life cycle of empires, I guess you could say that the time from the end of World War II up until where should we put basically the 20th century from 1946 to 1999 was the Pax Romana of America. For those of you who don't know, that was like the golden age of the Roman Empire, or when things were at their best before the decline began. You know what? I'm gonna look it up really quick just to get the official definition. All right, Google's AI overview says 200 years of relative peace, stability, and prosperity in the Roman Empire from 27 BCE to 180 CE. So, Jesus was born during the Pax Romana. Now, as my 8th grade world history teacher said, things weren't perfect. Remember, the key word in that is still relative peace, meaning there wasn't any major conflicts. Okay, maybe the Pax Romana of America was a little shorter than up until 1999. I'd say 62, because that's when American graffiti took place. I'm going to do a separate video about American graffiti soon because I really want to talk about what I learned in 12th grade film studies about how that movie basically shows the last glimmer of America's innocence between World War II and the start of the Vietnam War, though there was the Korean War in the 50s. I mean, again, the key word here is relative peace. I don't know too much about the Korean War, so I'm not going to say anything more. I'm just going to say that 1946, the first year after World War II was officially over, up until 1962, I think we could call that America's Pax Romana. Comment down below if you have a different definition of what years you would consider for America's Pax Romana. I would say 1946 is definitely the start because that's when the oldest boomers, like one of my grandfathers, was born. But then I think about how the Vietnam War is really when I guess things went downhill or when the counterculture became more relevant or the peace was a lot there wasn't really peace or well again the Vietnam War America was literally at war at that point so okay I'm just gonna move on but I think we got a little off topic here. Getting back on topic, older generations brag about being married and having kids and a mortgage by the time they were my age, 28. Again, according to Tim Pool, most of human history, people were having their kids in their early 20s. But again, that's the majority of human history on the grand scale of things. And I'm pretty sure it was still like that up until a certain point. But yeah, the fact is, it's different today. The reality is that Gen Z and younger millennials are facing record housing costs. A lot of them chose to get into student debt without actually thinking through the whole college process. I'm sorry, that's just how it is. Again, college is not inherently a bad thing. It's going in without a plan that I think is a bad idea, as I learned from personal experience with not really having a plan or not really following through on a plan until one I made in senior year, and I followed through on that, but by then it was too little too late because I wasn't really doing anything up until that point to build the experience. As I said in the video about the work-life balance, I think I did lean a little too far into I think I put too much weight on the life part of the work-life seesaw, for lack of a better analogy. But anyway, with all that in mind, and even with the boomer archetype being what was considered standard, the fact is, living at home is not the outlier anymore. Technically, it was always the norm. Multi-generational households and all that. Pew Research shows more young adults live with parents now than any time since the Great Depression. So yeah, basically we're going back to an earlier time in human history, or we're reaching or we've gone past the end of the good times, and now things are just reverting back to the difficulty level they were at before the boomers came in. Well, before the greatest generation started getting back from the war and then getting all the jobs, and then the boomers came in when they came of age, and then you get the idea. Anyway, they say men who live at home are stunted, immature, and socially behind, despite living at home being the norm. The reality is that for many, it's a rational economic choice, or even a way to regroup, pay down debt, or support family. Like, some of them might be doing that to do something for their family. And again, it's a good way to save up money for a down payment on a house. But even with doing something responsible like that, some men still feel trapped by the stigma. It isn't just living at home, it's what people assume about your character. They assume you're just a loser who can't cut it in the real world, when in fact, you might actually be doing pretty well in the real world, but you're just using it as it strategically. Personally, it started out kind of strategic for me, but now it's just where I am, and I'm trying to do better at finding my way out. Anyway, the point of all this is living at home does not define your manhood. What matters is whether you're building a path forward, not whether you're paying rent to your parents or a landlord, assuming your parents charge you rent like my friends' parents do, and my heart goes out to them. Anyway, the broader takeaway is that society's perception is outdated. It's based on the archetype of the boomer graduating high school and moving out right away. Actually, that was still considered the norm as recently as 2002 with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 2. No, Spider-Man 1 in 2002. Because I clearly remember Peter literally moved out of Aunt May's house right after graduating high school. Maybe it wasn't the day after the graduation ceremony, but he moved out right away. He did not remain with living with Aunt May. Honestly, I just realized no Spider-Man variant lived with Aunt May past graduating high school. It's like Peter Parker always moved out right away in every version of his story. You let me know in the comments down below if there's a version of Peter Parker who lived at home past graduating high school. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up here for the video. The point of it all is there is nothing to be ashamed about living at home if you're a man in your late 20s. Unfortunately, some people still perceive men in that situation as losers. That is unfortunately the harsh reality. So, give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to comment what you thought about all this. Subscribe for cultural commentary and rants from a man caught between generations. Be sure to join me at the Zillennial Nexus Point Discord. Link will be in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.